Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our first live broadcast here on LinkedIn. My name is Bruna Smith. I'm on the marketing team here at H2O.ai, and I'd love to start off by introducing our speaker. Today, our Q&A is with Ben Cox, Director of Product Marketing at H2O.ai, who will answer your questions about responsible and ethical AI in times of COVID-19. Ben specializes in research and thought leadership on responsible AI, AI transformation, and AI transformation strategy. He is an MBA candidate majoring in business analytics and econometrics at University of Chicago Booth School of Business. Ben holds a bachelor's degree in economics from the College of Charleston, and prior to H2O.ai, Ben was a manager at Ernst & Young's Artificial Intelligence Innovation Lab. Welcome and thanks for being with us here today, Ben. Before we dive into our Q&A, can you please share a quick intro?
Sure. Thank you for passing it over. Thanks everybody for joining today. As Bruna said, my name is Ben. I'm just going to kind of give a background of some things that I've been thinking in this space. We've done a lot of thought leadership on responsible AI. At H2O, we think it's super important. You know, as models developed and got very complicated, I think there was an industry trend to really become attached to complicated models, right? You know, they're very accurate. Neural networks came out and they kind of got seen as the silver bullet. And we kind of missed the step where we really wanted to know what was going on under the hood of models. So at H2O, we spent a lot of time talking about responsible AI. We came at it from an explainability perspective, where we started from a framework of how do you statistically validate, audit, review, analyze models, machine learning models specifically, and determine and figure out what's going on under the hood. So we've kind of bucketed responsible AI as this parent umbrella for all of these things you should be doing for a truly responsible AI deployment, right? So machine learning interpretability, explainable AI, compliance, secure AI, ethical AI, human-centered AI. These are kind of the core focus points that we're looking at. And then from an ethics perspective, I should caveat this by saying I don't have a doctorate in ethics. We don't have that background. But here are some considerations that I've been kind of kicking around lately, and I think that as practitioners of data scientists or as firms looking to engage with AI or explore artificial intelligence as an opportunity for your company, that you should consider, right? So I think out the gate, one of the first examples you hear about ethical AI is around discrimination, or the way that we do it statistically is disparate impact analysis. So are certain groups of people by ethnicity, by gender, by income, by educational level being discriminated against algorithmically in a model? You know, we can kind of determine that, and we can find out if certain biases are coming through to the model in ways that are legal or illegal or just in bad faith, right? So that's one example that I think is good for when you think about the ethics of this space. Another one that I don't think it gets enough conversation that I think is important is around organizational change, right? Because artificial intelligence is often a tool for automating decision-making, the next logical step is how many people can you remove from the supply chain of that knowledge. And that's not really a good way to think about it, right? Like if you come up with a really effective model that kind of summarizes knowledge of 10 people, it doesn't make sense to just lay these people off, right? There's a transition period, there's organizational change, there's readiness, there's kind of a transition. And then there's how do you transition these folks who certain rote or redundant processes that have been automated by AI into more profit-driving strategic functions that they have the institutional knowledge to execute on. So that's the second example. And I think a third that I think about ethically that's really important is around systemic or externality risk. If you are a company that is deploying AI at scale, we all kind of saw this in 2008, right? There were some incorrectly priced models that when they broke with respect to credit and housing, the whole macroeconomic environment took a massive hit. If you're a company that's deploying AI and one of your models breaks, for instance, are there people downstream, whether it's customers or people adjacent to your business, that stand to lose from this, right? If you are in a business that can impact people negatively, if something goes wrong inside your business, this is something that you should also be considering very, very seriously. So I think with that, We're going to kind of open it up to questions. This isn't, I'm not providing any proofs here. I'm just kind of providing some considerations and frameworks as, business users, leaders of companies, as you start to engage with AI and how you start to think about these questions.
Yes, so let's see some of the questions. We had some pre-questions that people sent us. And the first one is, so people talk about COVID breaking models. Do you think there's truth to this, or what's different now after COVID?
Yeah, so I don't like the word break, but I hear it a lot. It's really around, all of these companies had these, that were deploying predictive models in their business cycle, had these kind of confidence intervals that they thought were the reality of situations that could occur. Now, the first week of true COVID unemployment job numbers was a 30 sigma standard deviation event. That's something like 1 in 100,000 years, right? So most models have not priced in this kind of wild anomaly outlier-like event. And yeah, like some of these models will break in that it flags a scenario that, it starts hitting all of these things very bizarrely that you weren't really prepared for. What I think it should do, though, however, is we tend as an industry to get really, attracted to complex models that are very, very accurate in a narrow scope, which statistically, this is just overfitting, right? Like you end up having this very aggressive model that's handled millions of iterations of the data, and it's very form fit to this one type of, profile of data. This coronavirus and COVID and this economic impact is outside of those parameters. And I think what people should take away from this is, how can we create models that produce a similar amount of accuracy with significantly more simplicity, right? Beware of unnecessary complexity. And I think that gets lost because I think a lot of people just like to build complex models. I know I do, but I know at H2O, we really try to consider how simple can we get it without losing alpha or yield or lift. And what's cool is that, we just put out a paper not too long ago where it's showing that with tabular data, we can do explainable neural networks and not lose any accuracy or predictiveness as we look for explainability or interpretability in our models. And I think that's critical. Like, I think as a practitioner, you can build the most complex model, but you should always work back and see how simple you can go without, taking loss, and then start to think about what the trade-off of stability versus interim loss of accuracy might be.
Sure, thanks. We have a question from Tori. What industries do you think AI and ML could or should play the biggest role in light of everything that we're seeing?
Yeah, that one's tough. I've thought about this a lot, and I don't know if I have the correct answer. I think a lot of people's heads or brains like jump to banking, right? I think when we hear bad economic data, like a lot of people are very inclined to say, oh, well, banks should adopt innovation, this and that. And I think that I wouldn't necessarily go there, right? I think the most impacted that, we're not talking enough about is really supply chains, right? If you look at manufacturing numbers, they're not great. Like factories are not producing. We're having trouble finding situations that it's stable to have people in factories continuing to produce. And then that has a ripple effect, right? Like when you're trying to distribute goods, is it going to get somewhere in time? Are certain, distribution channels open? All of these are up in the air with COVID, and it's an evolving thing, right? Like certain countries are in a better spot than others, and this ebb and flow could occur. So supply chain just has this rack of uncertainty that they're trying to figure out. Now, I think that you're going to find in certain retail opportunities, or if you think about fast food, a lot of these places who have been tinkering with certain automation methods might really lean into it now, especially given the consideration that we have this physical person-to-person issue that we're kind of battling against.
Okay, we have one more question here. Felipe from Brazil. His question is, given the current economic environment, how can companies be starting to apply AI? Isn't it a challenging time to pursue new tech investments?
Yeah, so That's actually a good question. I think what people assume is that there's two assumptions, right? The one assumption is that when we face these big blocks of uncertainty or these big time periods of uncertainty, a lot of companies pivot into or move into liquidity, move into security, take risk off the table. And for a lot of companies, not financial even, that means stopping, or putting a pause on, innovation budgets or technology spend as you try to look to, experiment with new profit driving exercises and things like that. But the good thing is when you start to deploy AI, we like to talk about big transformations because it's really awesome to go into a company and really overhaul things from the ground up. But there's a great side of this business as well too, where you can start taking like small calculated approaches at AI. Find one specific use case, figure out how from a low cost perspective you can adopt one model and run it in tandem and see if there's lift. You don't have to, we got in this digital transformation trend where every company was just piling money into consultants, technology architecture, new employees to create this whole new, view of the company. But you don't actually need to do that up front. I think it's really an exciting opportunity to take like calculated shots at applying AI to specific areas, especially, one case that we did a write-up on was, banks in response to stimulus and lending and PPP type stuff have an insurmountable amount of processing and administration that they do not have the staff ready to take. So when you think about applying AI to specific things like kind of just like, application disposition from one bucket to another and sorting, it's not solving the great problem of your company, but it's adding a lot of lift in a very tactical, calculated fashion with a low amount of risk. And because data science is kind of this democratic community or democratized community where we share models, you can take these nice calculated shots without having to completely overhaul your business right out the gate. And that's what I think most companies should do is like take some measured approaches and scale into it. And then once you have a couple like cases where you've proven value, you've proven that you have data, then really going for it. And that can also be when, the economic cloud's clear, right?
Okay, we have some more questions here. So there's a person asking, in your opinion, what is the best approach to handle lots of unlabeled data we have? Is there specific priority in the industry? This is more technical. I don't know if.
It is more technical, and I'll try to keep it a little higher level, just because I don't know what the audience is today. Unlabeled data is tricky, right? One thing, so I have a background where I worked in financial crimes, and a lot of what we ran into was, you're trying to label if something is like, is financial crime or is possibly financial crime or not. One thing that you can do is if you know your target variable, like if it's high, medium, low risk, what you can do is you can kind of take an initial shot in what you think. Like you might have some previous benchmarks and you have new data coming in and you're trying to see how the previous models perform on new data. You can try that, but you can also do a very aggressive, like for all high risk proposals, sort those and have a human in the mix and kind of review those. And then there's also the framework of if your model, like anything that your model is like marginally not confident on, also pass that to a human. I think especially in times like this where there's just a lot of volatility and data, the profiles of data is changing, you should take a very conservative approach to accepting predictions of models, right? Like use all of the existing historical data you have to generate some predictions. But for high risk things or low confidence things, toss it to the business and analyze that. Because what you're gonna want to do, especially in these situations, is use domain expertise and lean on that as heavily as possible. And that's this situation that we're facing right now is a phenomenal case for human-centered AI, which I think a lot of people talk about. If you have a fully automatic, systemic, machine learning business, you will not respond to these situations well if you don't have these black swan scenarios baked into your models, which you probably don't.
Right. We have a question from Roger. Is H2O driverless AI with its feature engineering capability considered as an instant ML when trading time series data?
So I'm not sure if I know what instant ML means, but I do know that automatic feature engineering, we do have a time series, and it's still part of our overall auto ML bucket or workbench. So yeah, everything that we've built within driverless is fully auto ML, including automatic feature engineering. It's really, really cool to see. Like, I think it's a profoundly useful piece of equipment, because I think for us, right, if you started early in data science, 80% of your job is feature engineering and a lot of the front end prep work and kind of like intuition. But driverless kind of takes that out of the loop, which I love.
Okay, I have one other question. Does
Sure.
being more responsible, ethical with AI adoption mean my company will have to sacrifice accuracy or predictive power?
Oh no, yeah, this is a common misconception that I've encountered, right? Like, for a while, when deep neural nets really like came to fruition, we had the compute power, we had the data sets to really make these models perform better over time. That appeared to be the case, right? Like that sort of meant like deep learning might have been the best model, and then all of the other models are not as good. But what's been really great is we've been able to create methods like the one that we worked on, explainable neural networks. I think we did this alongside maybe Wells Fargo, put a paper out about it. So we have explainable neural networks, which is great. But also, we've seen a phenomenally powerful boost in non-deep learning models, such as just like big ensembles like XGBoost, light GBMs, and that kind of thing, where they're able to perform really, really well. That kind of responsibility or explainability versus accuracy trade-off is kind of a thing of the past, which has been really great, and something that we find super, super important.
Okay, so thank you so much. We got some really good questions, and Rafael Cost from the company, he's also a maker, community maker. He has been helping answer some of the questions. Thank you, Ben, for taking the time today and answering all these questions. I'd also like to say thank you to everyone who joined us. Have a great rest of your day, and stay tuned for our upcoming live broadcasts.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Really appreciate it.